Well, IU fans, I think 24 hours after that one, my eyes are finally washed out. All the acid that it absorbed from a 2 hour operational failure in Piscataway, the middle of a downpour. There was a roof on the rack, fortunately, but I'm not sure how much better those teams could have scored had they played in the rainstorm. Rutgers got the win, 66-57. And Hoosier Nation is panicking. There's no other way to put it. There are very, very few people, a very, very small number of people who are saying, hey, this will all work out. Everyone relax. Everyone's freaking out. Indiana's guards stink. Mike Woodson's on the hot seat. What do the assistants do? Dockich is right. We've got all sorts of things going on right now in Hoosier land, and Indiana's got to figure some things out. Well, the good news is Matt and I are going to give our initial reactions to Indiana's 9-point loss. It really felt like 18. Preview Minnesota, and in between, ask some hot topic questions related to this IU basketball team as we sit here in the beginning of January. We have a lot to dive into, folks, here on episode 320 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Wednesday, January 10th, 2024, where I'm your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, Nick Saban retired, and IU fans are hoping Mike Woodson does the same tonight, right? That's what's going on. The sky is falling. Indiana's 3-2 in Big Ten play. They're 93rd in the KenPom ratings. The NCAA tournament looks like a bleak possibility. What are your thoughts after Indiana dropped one to Nebraska, beat Ohio State, and then went to Piscataway and lost 66-57?
I think people need to chill the F out. Respectfully. Let's chill out. All right. This is not Archie Miller. This is a guy that's gotten to us to back-to-back tournaments, right? That's because of Trace.
Shout out Trace.
Look, Mike Woodson hasn't had one complete good roster since he's gotten here. Now, some people are going to say that it's Mike Woodson's fault.
Sure.
And that's a fair criticism. But also, it's not just Mike Woodson, it's a staff, right? And so I think some of those staff members, including the weight and training staff, probably need to be looked at this summer. But regardless of that, we knew this roster was flawed going into this year. I mean, we missed on multiple guards, including one that's doing fantastically well at Tennessee. And St. John's looks really, really good. And, you know, you guys know who's at those places. And
yeah.
Caleb Love is having a good season at Arizona. And look,
Nick
Indiana,
Timberlake is sitting on the bench at Kansas.
Yeah, again, you hit some, you miss on some. Some you kind of happy you miss on. Look, Big Ten road games. My point is my Big Ten road games are hard to win. Hard to win. Ask Purdue. Okay?
Well, what's the number, right? We talked about it, didn't we? I think Big Ten road teams are now 6-22 in conference play.
They're 6-22 in conference play, including Michigan has gone and played on the road twice, and they suck, and they're two of those losses. Okay? So you take probably the worst team in the league out in Michigan. You are 4-22. I mean, Michigan probably counts, but you're 4-20, I think, on
double check that, but yeah,
the home road split. And the road teams are 4-22 in conference play. You just don't win on the road in this conference, which leads me into look at the next two games for Indiana. You have a home game against Minnesota and a home game against Purdue this week. I think you win both of those or one of those, and you're chilling. You're absolutely chilling. I use in a very tough stretch of games. Going to the rack has always been hard for the last, 8-9 years even.
Mhm.
really. To win in at Rutgers has been tough. You lost by 16 in Nebraska. Guess who lost by 16 in Nebraska last night? The number one team in the country, Purdue. Like, these things are going to happen. If the Hoosiers take care of their home court advantage and pull off a upset
Mhm.
on the road once or twice this year, they are going to be chilling because they already have a road win in their pocket. Indiana is one of the 4 road wins that,
Yeah.
again,
Well, let's just
that aren't,
we'll call it six
yeah,
and 22 because Michigan also does have one of the road wins this year in Big Ten play at Iowa. So let's just
okay.
say let's include Michigan in
It's still
this.
6 and 22
Six
is
and 22,
it's not like
Indiana.
25% if I'm doing a close around that. You have a 25% chance of winning on the road currently in the Big Ten, right? Indiana already has one of those wins. They've now lost
21,
two,
21%.
yeah, 21%. That now they've lost their last 2 games on the road. So surely they'll win one of their next 2, right? To keep above average. Utopia. No, but seriously, it's hard to win on the road in the Big Ten. It's been hard to win on the road in the Big Ten for years now, and you have one of the better home court advantages in the country, and the team actually plays much differently at home than on the road. And you got some opportunities this year to take advantage of that, starting with the game on, what is it, Saturday or Sunday? I can't remember.
Friday against Minnesota, Tuesday against Purdue.
Sorry, Tuesday. I forgot we're not doing this on Monday.
Yeah.
Tuesday of next week at home against Purdue at night on Peacock.
Ooh.
But
Uh,
again, you have a chance to actually make something of the season this week. And I know you're coming off a very frustrating, depressing loss to Rutgers on the road where you feel like the sky is falling because nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing was going right for the Hoosiers last night. But
that's
there, you can still salvage this. It's not unsalvageable. And I know people are frustrated, and I get that you're frustrated, but you have to keep faith in the players right now because you're going to put yourself into a little bucket of fans of other teams that are also just as frustrated. Like, again, Michigan just suspended Doug McDaniel for the next 6 road games,
yeah, but
right?
we shouldn't be comparing Indiana to the worst teams, right? Like we should be comparing Indiana to the
I
teams that are
mean,
good
but
in the league.
Michigan had decent,
And my question is,
decent. They were
you
supposed to be
know,
good this year.
why is it that Wisconsin and Nebraska and Northwestern and Ohio State and I mean we don't even get to Purdue in this conversation or
Because
Illinois in this like
Nithin, Nithin.
Indiana's right. Indiana's got players that are just as strong, just as fast, just as athletic as those teams, if not more. And then they shoot 4 of 15 from the free throw line and can't and airball 3 threes in the game.
Yeah, like, again, it's very unflattering to
What?
Indiana the way that they lost, and I get that it's ugly, but at the same time, like, you're gonna have ugly losses in conference. That's going to happen, right? Does it suck that it's against Rutgers in a road game that they, you know, based on talent probably should have won? Yes, it's depressing, honestly.
I mean, yeah,
But
look, yeah.
and
Mhm.
I get the frustration. But there's still so much of the season left. They've shown us that they can show up in big games against some of the better teams in the country. They played Kansas to within 2 points, right? At
Yeah.
home.
They were the better team.
They were the better team. They gave away that game
Right. At the
because
end.
of immaturity and honestly just they're not as good of a team.
Sure.
And when you talk about other teams being like, why can they have a better season? It's because they have a better roster. Straight up. They have a more complete roster. I look at Northwestern's roster and they all, you know, they complement each other, right? Nicholson, Boo their
I don't
wings,
know
the
though. Like,
transfer from Princeton, like they actually all work together. Where you look at this Indiana roster, you have your best player, in my opinion, is Malik Renew,
okay, I'll give you
who's
that.
who's a 4, right?
Sure.
Then you go and get a 5-star recruit so that you can, salvage something out of the transfer portal / late signing
I
period.
mean, every
Who's
school in the
also a
country,
4.
if Northwestern could get Khalil Ware, they would have gotten Khalil Ware. Same thing with Wisconsin. Same thing
Khalil
with, right?
Ware,
right?
They
Like
would
you're
have,
gonna do that.
yes. And honestly, Cloware is still a big W for Indiana. He's still a very
And
good player.
Indiana's gonna take him from sitting on the bench at Oregon to the first round of the NBA draft in a year.
Exactly. That's a huge recruiting W. I don't care that he's frustrating to watch. I don't care that he kind of got outplayed by Cliff, who's one of the better bigs in the conference
Or
last night,
on
right?
Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Akpara.
Or
I'm okay.
Saturday.
I'm
Or Rink
okay with
Mass.
that. I'm look what Rank Mass did to Edie
I
yesterday. Like I think people are like Nebraska is good. Then you beat a very good Ohio State team at home. And then guess what? Rutgers is a team that's also trying to salvage their season and trying to win games at home. That was their Super Bowl.
they
Also,
were desperate.
they
That
were
game for them was like the Ohio State game for us.
exactly. So I think I need people to calm down. Calm down.
But they
Don't
also played like utter trash
I
on
get it,
Tuesday.
but that's again, they played like
Which
utter trash
and I'm
because
talking
the
about Rutgers.
roster.
I'm talking about Rutgers.
No, I know
Rutgers.
Rutgers
Like
also did
Indiana
not
played
play
all right
well
on
because
Saturday. Like
Rutgers is
Indiana went out there and played all right on Saturday. And that's why I'm saying like against Ohio State, I saw this team do some good things. Against Kansas, I saw this team do some good things. They had a very, very strong stretch in a couple of these non-conference games. For example, against Harvard, they really took over in the second half. And then, of course, I mean, that didn't get into the Michigan game or the Maryland game where they were clearly the better team in both of those contests. And they beat Ohio State. So, like, the roster isn't perfect, but at the end of the day, all I heard during the offseason was that senior guards were the key to success in college basketball. All I heard was that experience in the backcourt is where it's at. Mm-hmm. And so Indiana went out and, okay, they swung and missed on some recruits, but Xavier Johnson's back and Trey Galloway is back and whatever. Anthony Leal has a leadership role on this team. And you said we didn't need your Tamar Bates on this roster. And all I see is Indiana somehow have a regression, simply put, as far as their starting guards are concerned. And that type of inconsistent play is exactly what got the previous coach fired, right? And I'm not saying Mike Woodson is Archie because he's not, but that is a consistent theme here over the course of the last handful of years across the two coaches. The difference is Jalen Hood-Schifino. Then Mike Woodson will always be able to hold that over everyone. That he was able to, in times of crisis in the middle of last season, turn Jalen Hood-Schifino into a first-round draft pick into the NBA. But he was a youngster. I was looking forward to this year, saying Indiana has a couple of old guards. Wow, what an opportunity this is for Trey Galloway to step up. He's shooting 50% from the free throw line. Xavier Johnson was awesome on Saturday night. He was awesome. But then I get inconsistencies that I typically see out of freshmen instead of a sixth-year senior. So I'm sitting here and saying, what the heck is going on as far as the backcourt is concerned? And you're saying, look, Indiana can get a road win or two coming up. All I'm going to say is their next four on the road are going to be challenging. It's at Wisconsin, and it's at Illinois, and it's at Ohio State, and it's at Purdue. And that's going to be in a 4 in a 5-game stretch starting on January 19th.
You need to win your home games.
Indiana's got to take care of business at Assembly Hall because this thing could get ugly very, very fast. On this podcast last week, Matt, you and I said that the games against Nebraska and Ohio State would serve as a tipping point. And, well, they split the bill. I think what you're seeing now, though, is the Hoosiers on the road are a real work in progress. And that's what Mike Woodson said. And Mike Woodson apparently didn't have an issue with this team's energy or their level of intensity in that game on Tuesday night at Rutgers.
They just missed shots.
I don't know, Matt. I think that's part of it, but at the same time, I think there were some lazy plays. I think there were some sloppy plays, especially from the two guards that I mentioned. And the free throw shooting, to me, I completely don't understand how you have a historically bad performance shooting free throws. And in a game like that, where both teams struggled to reach 60, and Indiana didn't even get there, You miss 11 out of your 15, and if you're telling me Peyton Sparks is responsible for 10 of those, like I'll live with that. But all 15 attempts came from starting players on this
Yeah.
Indiana team. And that's where I sit here and go, what in the world is going on as far as Indiana at the free throw line? This team looks skilled. This team looks athletic. This team shoots a decent percentage from three over the last handful of weeks. How do you explain the free throw shooting, Matt? They're supposed to be close to automatic. I watched the Indiana women's team, and the Indiana women's team has good guards, and they got good forwards, and they shoot 1,000,000% from the free throw line. What the heck is going on with the men's team here as far as making free throws, especially in a close game like the Rutgers one, where if you made even a few more, the entire complexion of the game changes.
I don't know. I can't give you an opinion on that because I at this point I am absolutely perplexed as to how they don't shoot well. Like they have
It
decent
looks
enough
awful.
shooters on this team. It looks terrible. Look, I have a hypothesis kind of about this, and Ant,
Yep,
who,
yeah, right.
by the way, I didn't text Ant at all. This is not something that I've even said to Ant once. Pointed out that he thinks it has something to do with the weight training staff, because their legs look tired, which is something that I have talked about numerous times on this podcast over the years. This is not a recent thing. This has been since Cliff Marshall has
Yeah,
been there. This has been since
absolutely.
the Archie era. I've talked about this, and I do think there's something to that. When it comes to shooting, now the free throw shooting is just again lack of concentration, and honestly, I'm gonna say it's also a lack of confidence. It's a lack of confidence, and I don't know what the staff needs to do um, about that part of the issue, confidence. But they got to change up the way they warm up. Especially coming out of the half, they got to change the way they warm up. They got to change the way they kind of run things. Pre-game and leading up to the days leading up to the game. They got to change something. They got to just try something new because clearly whatever they've been doing hasn't been working, especially away from home and in big games. So you got to do something to kind of help them feel comfortable so they are confident when they're shooting, right? Because again, the basketball is like what they say is 90% mental at this level, right?
I
So
mean, to me, basketball is 90% putting the ball in the basket.
yeah, and whatever it takes to put the ball in the basket, it's
I
90% of
mean,
that.
and it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking to see a team shoot 4 of 15 from the line. And the one tweet that we sent out last night caught some steam. As far as the only other team involved in any kind of Division I men's basketball game in the last 2 years to shoot that bad from the free throw line was Antelope Valley,
Shout out Antelope Valley.
who I don't know if they've gotten this much PR before on Twitter, but those folks at Antelope Valley shot 4 of 16 in a game against Utah Valley. And of course, Utah Valley's Division I basketball team. That was a non-conference game. Historically awful performance. Shout out to the Marauders.
But again, it
Antelope
was
Valley. But this
so
leads me.
frustrating.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know, and it leads
yeah.
me to this, Matt, because I looked it up and I said, well, what's going on, right? Because we talked about the guards, we talked about the experience, and how it's really not paying off. It blew me away to see that every single player who isn't in his first year, so it could be a transfer in like Khalil Ware or Peyton Sparks. It could be a guy returning to IU like Trey Galloway or Xavier Johnson. Every player on this roster, I believe this is what it was. Every player on this roster who's returning for at least one season, except for Anthony Walker, has seen a decline in his free throw shooting. Every single one. I can't imagine that has happened with any college basketball team in recent memory. Like Xavier Johnson's free throw percentage is lower. Trey Galloway's we've talked about. Malik Renews is down. Khalil Wares has fallen a little bit. We're going to take CJ Gunn out of the conversation just because he doesn't attempt that many in the first place. But this, to me, is like alarm bells going off, right? Because in the Big Ten, free throws make a difference. And, right, there is a difference between a team that shoots 68% from the free throw line and a team that shoots 74%. That type of difference can make a 1 or 2 point decision in the game flip one way or the other. I'm just sitting here, and I don't know if it's a strength and conditioning problem. I don't know if it's a player personnel problem. But at the end of the day, like, Nebraska was 16 for 19 last night against Purdue. Okay? Yep. Penn State tonight, the worst team in the Big Ten, according to Ken Pom, is 9 of 10 against Northwestern. Northwestern in the same game is 3 for 4. Okay? I mean, Penn State made 20 of 26 in their win over Michigan. Maryland made 20 of 24, even though they lost to Minnesota. Like, this is what you've got to do. Like, it's just, these are free throws, Matt.
Yeah, but that's not a coaching thing. Like, you can't coach to be like, they're not doing anything to be like, you know what? I want us to work on everything but free throws. Like, a free throw, like working on free throws, that's in the guy's free time, right? Like, that's what you're supposed to work on after practice is your free throws, right? It's what you shoot before shoot around, right? Is you get your free throws up, you warm up. That's on the guys. That's not on the coaching staff. Which spells to me that this team doesn't really have a leader. That's what that tells me. You kind of look up and down this roster, and who is the leader on this roster?
It's Anthony Leal, according to Mike Woodson. That's what he said last night.
So your 13th guy off the bench is the
12th. Indiana left a scholarship open this year.
12th guy off the bench is the leader. The real estate agent in tow.
That's right. Yes, correct.
Real estate agent. Which
doesn't that say a lot? Doesn't that say a lot about this team? Where are the experienced guards?
Where is Xavier Johnson?
And I'll even tip my cap to Johnson in the fact that he was very helpful in Indiana's win over Ohio State on Saturday.
Yeah, he was one of
So do you pull your hair out at the inconsistency of a guy like Johnson, or do you pull your hair out at just the general regression of a guy like Trey Galloway? Or the answer is probably both, because Galloway, heck, he went off against Kansas.
Yep.
How is Mike Woodson having this problem at Indiana? I was told that Mike Woodson would save our backcourt. So this is where, right, like, this is where, you know, I look at a couple of guys coming into this recruiting class next year, and it's exciting when you think about Liam McNeely coming in, or you think about Derek Queen potentially coming in. That only goes so far, right? Like, at the end of the day,
they got to hit in the transfer portal, and we'll talk about that more as the season expires,
especially if Indiana starts losing a bunch.
Yeah, but yeah, I hope we don't get to that point. But no, I mean, Indiana's got to hit on guard specifically in the transfer portal, and I'm sure Mike Woodson would be the first person to tell you that. But they actually have to go out and do it. All right, and so that's something we'll see about in this offseason. But I've always thought that this season was a development year in the first place. You kind of look at all the people that left after last year.
But along those lines, who's developing? Malik Renew.
I think CJ Gunn is showing a little bit right here or there.
He's showing a little bit.
Showing glimpses.
I'll give him credit for Saturday.
Your other guards that you have are Trey Galloway, who's not looked good this year.
Inverse opposite,
but he did develop under Mike Woodson in the last couple of years.
Well, right? That's what makes it even more frustrating.
It does make it frustrating, but he got to a point that now you're frustrated that he isn't the former player that he was. So he has done that. Right. And then I'll add in the fact that you have a guard that's injured who I think they would be developing, right? In Ja'Kai Newton, who would be playing. Gabe Cupps really hasn't had the ability to show his best stuff because he's playing in a role that he was never asked to play. and he doesn't have the same level of talent that Jalen Hood-Schifino did in order for him to be able to play in the same way last year. Like when we looked at Gabe Cup's recruiting profile, he's a 4-year player was being asked to start for
Sure.
multiple games this year, right? And
Right.
and that should not be a thing. So when we're talking about guards here,
But I'm not sure how much better Gabe Cups is now compared to the start of the season.
that's fine, but he's a freshman, and freshmen don't like. It's hard to see improvement as a freshman. It's very rare for a freshman to seriously improve during a year. Only the very very elite freshmen do that, like Jalen Hood-Schifino, right? A lot
Sure.
of times you have a Malik Renew. Remember Malik Renew last year, right? He was
Mhm.
at times completely and utterly unplayable, and Slash would play himself off the court because he would continuously get into foul trouble. And this year he's our best player, right? I'm not saying that or Gabe is going to turn into Malik next year and all of a sudden be dropping 24 and 30 points in a game, but he could go from being completely useless to, or not completely useless. That's rude. From being a non-factor to being at least a contributing member of the team. Because right now he is not a contributing member of this basketball team. He is a placeholder at best. And so when you're looking at projecting this roster forward, right, and you're like, people aren't improving, C.A. Gunn's going to be back next year, unless he transfers. Renew will be back next year, unless he transfers. Okay? Those are two pretty decent pieces. You have Gabe Cupps, who's been developing, Ja'Kai Newton, who's sitting out and should be playing. You have Trey Galloway, who can be back, right? And let's see what happens this summer and if they can get him right. Um, so there's pieces on this roster you can build around. You go get two guards, like two big time guards, and you add in a 5-star center and you add in, junior year Malik Renew, and you might even have a top 10 team in Bloomington come this time next year. But you got to go get the guards because Mike Woodson hasn't had any other than Jalen Hood-Schifino. He hasn't recruited top level guards. He got Xavier Johnson in the transfer portal. He's gotten Gabe Cupps, who's a 4-year player. He got Tamar Bates, who was supposed to be a
Well,
5-star recruit and supposed to be good.
I mean
But
that kind of set that
I'm not
that
even sure he's a guard. If I'm going to be honest with you, I think he's more of a small forward, right? Or a small forward. So he doesn't even play guard. And then you add in the other 5-star recruits are Malik Renew is like a borderline top 40 guy, right?
right,
Who's a power forward. You have
right.
Mbako, who's a power forward, by the way. You
Yeah,
need guards.
I get what you're saying. I understand, but right, like Northwestern's not chock full of 5-star guards,
Yeah,
right?
but they have
And
one
neither
really,
is
really
Nebraska.
good one, and they got a
And
second good one
so
this year.
and so, I don't know how much I trust Mike Woodson into developing any of these guys this year or next year into the next Boo Boo League or into the next Kisei Tominaga or the next Jalen Pickett. Never mind the next Jalen Hood-Schifino,
You don't
right?
need them
Like
to be.
to me, I mean, I think at some point I want to see Indiana have a top 5 backcourt in the league consistently.
Re-
And
Nithin, respectfully, you don't need these guys to develop into stars. You don't. What you need them to develop into is usable players.
Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer,
Braden
like
Smith's a star now. You know?
sounds like a lot of teams have stars in this league.
They
I
do.
mean,
They
look,
do.
this is, and never mind someone like Elijah Mitchell, who we'll see on Friday night, who's taking that step forward. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like his name. I might have butchered that. Elijah Mitchell's the backup in San Francisco. I'll get it here in just a sec. But when it's all said and done, Indiana has I think it all comes back to, okay, to a large degree, Indiana's old guards taking a step back. And
Yeah.
that to me is what I'm going to pay very close attention to as we go into next season, for example, as it relates to Indiana. Elijah Hawkins. Um, that's what I'm going to be paying attention to as far as Mike Woodson's tenure is concerned. Because if Indiana's starting backcourt plays like they played last year, I don't think we have too many conversations right now as far as the sky is falling, as far as Indiana being 100th or 93rd in the Ken
But you
Pom
don't have a
rankings.
Jalen Hood-Schifino on this team.
I don't think it would have mattered. I think if Xavier Johnson sustained his level from the end of the 21-22 season and what we saw at the beginning of last year when he was awesome at Xavier, for example, we would be right there, you know, as far as the thick of the NCAA tournament conversation.
Okay,
And it's the same
but
deal with Trey Galloway. And
Nithin,
that doesn't get into the conversation of what are we getting from CJ Gunn. I wish we had gotten the CJ Gunn of Ohio State against Kansas, against Florida Gulf Coast, against Army, against Harvard, right? That's
Nithin.
where I'm sitting here and I'm saying, you just got outplayed by Mawot Mag and Derek Simpson and Austin Williams. We're not even talking about Purdue or Wisconsin or Illinois yet.
Yeah. Nithin, did we not get that Xavier Johnson though? Last game or the game previous to that, the Ohio State game?
We did.
Right?
There's no question we did.
Was he not coming off of a foot injury?
He
Like,
was.
I don't want to make excuses for the guys for
So,
not
like, what do you
playing
expect
well.
out of Xavier Johnson the rest of the way this year?
I expect him to play like the Ohio State game 75% of the time.
Okay.
And he's going to have a stinker one every 4 games because
Okay.
we've seen that throughout his career at Indiana. And honestly, when he started at Pittsburgh too, the Pittsburgh fans were like, good luck when we got him, remember, because he was known to have not only just a hothead, Rutgers game, but also to be extremely inconsistent, to go from an absolute world beater to losing to, you know, Louisville, right? And not being able to do anything offensively that he really wants to, and just playing completely and utterly out of rhythm and out of sorts. And you know, to me, that it's still the same. He's still the same player, right? He's still the same player that we got in the transfer portal after his sophomore year. And players really don't change
Yeah, I don't.
once after year 3. It just doesn't happen.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think the growth Xavier Johnson showed at the end of his first year at Indiana was something I was expecting him to sustain. And
Yeah,
maybe that
okay.
was
His
that
first year, he grew into it, yeah.
yeah.
But
And
after his
so
first year,
look,
that he's a complete player.
like here's where I am on this. I'm ready for Mike Woodson to make starting lineup changes. Like that's where I am.
Didn't he do
Okay.
that for this game?
And it doesn't necessarily no, Indiana's played the same 5 all
Okay, yeah.
year.
That's
The only
right.
thing they've
Yeah.
swapped out is cups for Johnson when Johnson's been hurt. Like I think
Right.
it's high time Mike Woodson put someone else in the starting lineup. And it's not necessarily because it's the 5 best guys, but because you've got to shake something up. I think Mike Woodson's got to send a message at this point, especially with 2 home games coming around the corner and then a brutal stretch. Of course, Purdue at home is part of a brutal stretch. This is a time for me where you can make something happen. And I understand folks are saying, what are you talking about, you idiot? The bench has been awful. Who the heck are you going to put in the starting lineup? I think you either put Gabe Cupps back in the starting lineup, let him facilitate the action for Mbako, for Renew, for Ware, and then Xavier Johnson can completely dominate usage when the bench minutes begin in each game. Or you send a message to Trey Galloway. Because I'm still not sure Trey Galloway is getting enough criticism for how poor he's been this year outside of the Kansas game.
Yeah.
And you send a message, they say, Trey, look, we might have you for another year next year. We're probably counting on you coming back next year. Your level of play outside of the Kansas game has not been acceptable. And this is not a permanent move. But CJ Gunn, hey, the last couple of games, you've looked all right. I'm going to reward you. I'm going to try to slot you in the starting lineup, see if you can capitalize on that promotion. Meanwhile, Trey Galloway, I want to see how you respond to reverting to a bench role. Because let's face it, with Indiana's starting lineup the way it is, when you start putting 2 or 3 or 4 bench players in the game at the same time, it is consistently clear that whatever lead Indiana has goes away. Or whatever way the game is going in a positive direction for IU, it simply changes. How many more times do we need to see a starting a 5 of Gabe Cupps and CJ Gunn and Caleb Banks and Peyton Sparks in the game, or Anthony Walker in the game? And if you want to start Walker, be my guest too. Like, I don't know. You can make it work however you want. But I think it's time for Mike Woodson between tonight and tomorrow night before this game on Friday to make a change to the lineup. Matt, is there anything else you want to see this team change between now and, say, the end of January, if they want to get a winning streak going in Big Ten play? Because there are winnable games in this league. What would you like to see this team change, if anything, on either side of the ball? I know we've seen some success with zone, some full court press. Anything change on offense? Mike Woodson has a lot of things to pick from.
Less Mbako, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think, especially if he's missing on offense.
You got Walker stepping up.
Walker stepping up, and Walker plays like the levels on defense between Walker and Mbako is night and day. So less Mbako. Honestly, I'd take Mbako out of the starting lineup, put in CJ Gunn.
That would be interesting to me. I would
right, because you're starting 3 guards and the 2 bigs, and I think you can go with that, and then run zone when Mbako's in, so he doesn't have that much responsibility.
Yep.
Like that's what I would change. But good coaches are stubborn, and sometimes to their own fault. And so I think Woodson's going to still be stubborn. Maybe not about the starting lineup, but about going zone.
Like,
be stubborn about.
I actually overall don't think Mike Woodson, I think he's stubborn in some of the big picture stuff, but I think game to game, he's shown a willingness to adapt, right? Like, we saw him go zone against Louisville. We saw him take Khalil Ware out at the end of the, for the home stretch of the Ohio State game. He basically said, look, our 3-guard lineup is working against the Buckeyes. We need this win. We're going to ride CJ Gunn to the finish line, and it worked. I understand he's stubborn as far as, okay, we got to limit teams to 60 points, and I need Xavier Johnson to be better and all this. But I don't know. Game to game, I feel like he's pretty flexible. I like your point about maybe seeing less of Mbako or giving him more of a bench role. He's a youngster. Yeah. And maybe going up going up against some of these bench units in the Big Ten could help him elevate his level of play, and then maybe reinsert him back into the starting lineup in February. I think that's something you could potentially look into. Remember, last year, sliding Jordan Geronimo somewhat unexpectedly into the starting lineup sparked Indiana's rejuvenation in the middle of January last year. And it's not something he stuck to all season, but you said, hey, we got to shake some things up. Of course, injuries kind of forced your hand a little bit there with Race Thompson going out. But hey, this is something where maybe Mike Woodson can, with a full roster, show a little flexibility. I also want to see more Anthony Leal, Matt. Call me a truther, call me a conspiracy theorist, whatever you want. I think Anthony Leal, I'm dead serious right now, is the second best guard on this team. And he also shows a propensity to rebound. We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah.
How Indiana's given up at least 19 offensive rebounds in their last 2 games. Mike Woodson called him a leader. Mike Woodson said Anthony Leal's had some good practices over the last few weeks. Mike Woodson has said that this is, Mike Woodson has said this, but obviously Leal's a fan favorite type of player as far as when he plays in the game. Leal's 3-point shooting stroke has shown some improvement. He had a big 3 against Nebraska before that game out of hand. That game got out of hand. Call me crazy, but
no,
for Anthony Leal, to me,
you're kind of crazy, but I kind of like it. It's
more Anthony Leal to me. I don't know. Mr. Basketball, he was pursued by a bunch of solid high major universities before committing to IU. I've seen enough during his playing time to show me that There's something still there. Look, sometimes it's the craziest solution that ends up being right. And if Mike Woodson wants more consistent guard play from old guys, Anthony Leal potentially could be the answer. I am probably higher on Anthony Leal than almost anyone who pays attention to IU basketball. We're not going to dive into that much further. Quickly, folks, it's time for Who Won the Week. This past week in IU sports, we like to look outside of football, men's basketball, when we talk about this particular part of our podcast. The Indiana women's team, Matt, they are absolutely slaughtering their opponents right now. Tonight is a bit of a different scenario. They're actually down by 5 at halftime to Penn State right now in a game over on Big Ten Plus. The Hoosiers face Iowa in an extremely hyped Big Ten showdown Saturday night on Fox. But over the course of the past week, the Hoosiers hosted Michigan, absolutely crushed them, 80-59. Michigan's a solid Big Ten program. They'd beaten Ohio State, the preseason Big Ten favorite. One of the preseason Big Ten favorites. Michigan beat them. They came into Bloomington, lost by 21. Indiana had an unbelievable start to that game. The perfect first quarter from the field. Then the Hoosiers carried that hot shooting out to Lincoln, Nebraska, where we beat the Cornhuskers by 22. Nebraska also a team in the top half of the league, a team that could, I think, very well work their way into the NCAA tournament when it's all said and done. Sydney Parrish has been awesome. Mackenzie Holmes is nearing the school record for points in a career. Looking forward to seeing the Hoosiers take on Iowa Saturday night after they come back from this halftime deficit against Penn State here and defend home court on this Wednesday night. Folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ, as well as at The Hoosier Sound. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. Tell a friend. Share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Matt, all 14 teams in the Big Ten are in the top 113 in KenPom. Northwestern crushes Michigan State at home. Then they go to Penn State, the team who's last in the league, and the Nittany Lions right now are in front of the Wildcats. In fact, they held like an 8 or 9 point halftime lead in that game. There's a lot of craziness in college basketball. There's a lot of craziness in Big Ten play. Talk to me about how Indiana stacks up in this league. Do you think Indiana is poised here to potentially get to 10 conference wins? Because they have to do that at a bare minimum, in order to get considered for NCAA tournament selection.
I think they are, but I think just barely. I think when you look at the tier of teams, it's Purdue,
sure,
and then Illinois, Wisconsin, and then Michigan State, Ohio State, and then everybody else. And I maybe would put Northwestern with Michigan State and Ohio State. But then it's everybody else. And I think Indiana is the better of the rest of those teams. Nebraska's in there as well. Actually, I put Northwestern down where Indiana is, okay, and I put Nebraska where Michigan. Sure. I think Northwestern, Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan State, Illinois, yep, Wisconsin, Purdue. Those are the 6 to 7 really good teams in the league. Sure. Indiana is probably 8.
Okay.
Right? And yeah, so I think they're above Minnesota. I think they're above Iowa.
Okay. Like Indiana hosts both of those teams in January, by the way.
And so when you're looking at a bubble watch sort of thing, if Indiana can go 40% against the top 7, sure, right? I think they'll be in, and they'll be the 8th team in. They'll probably be the play-in game.
You're technically 1-1 against the top 7 right now, right? Because you didn't say Michigan, you didn't say Maryland, no, you didn't say Rutgers. So nope, they're 2-1 against the bottom half. They're 1-1 against the top half. Of course, there have been some bumps and bruises along the way, but you also have to credit this team for how they played against Maryland. They were by far the better team in that game. How they played against Michigan, where they got the job done on the road. Same deal with Ohio State. Some ups and downs in that game, but they got the victory. So we'll see. I think the interesting point here is within the 4 walls, behind the scenes, does Indiana feel like they need to reconstruct some things, or do they feel like they need to stay the course? I actually don't know the answer to that question. I think Mike Woodson might say, hey, we have a couple of issues. We got to shoot better free throws. We got to rebound better. And Mike Woodson typically has been able to troubleshoot issues at Indiana over the last couple of years. We also had Trace Jackson Davis the last couple of years and Jalen Hood-Schifino last season. So we'll see what happens this year. I want to see someone grab the bull by the horns here outside of Xavier Johnson, right? We know what Xavier Johnson is like on the court. He's aggressive. He is very much a bull by the horns type of player. I want to see someone else do that. I want to see Malik Renew. He got popped in the face last night and it didn't look great. And I want to see him sort of channel some of that energy. Let's go. I want to see him not only evolve as a player, but evolve as a leader, evolve as a gamer. Just as far as, hey, this is Big Ten play. I'm not taking any nonsense anymore. This is my time. Everyone else can go after themselves. And same thing with Khalil Ware, right? Have a give IDGAF attitude and just try to dominate play, especially when you play a team like the Minnesota Golden Gophers or the Iowa Hawkeyes, where someone like Ware, who's again going to be a first-round pick in the NBA draft, where he can step up and say, "Hey, look, this is my time. I'm going to dominate. Everyone else, get out of my way." Matt, the Hoosiers on Friday night host the Minnesota Golden Gophers. It's a 6:30 p.m. Eastern tip on FS1. Don't know if Mike Woodson will channel Tom Allen and say that Fridays are for high school basketball. I doubt it. Indiana's got a couple of Friday games coming up here. Ken Pom has Indiana favored by 2. And, well, the Hoosiers do take care of business. They will move to 4-2 in Big Ten play. Ken Pom, by the way, has Indiana finishing 16-15 on the season. So that is how the Ken Pom model figures the Hoosiers will do from here on out in the regular season. But there are a bunch of games in there that are toss-ups, and that's how life is in the Big Ten. In fact, I think I saw earlier that both games tonight were like a 2 or a 3 point spread. Tomorrow, Maryland is favored by 6 against Michigan, Illinois by 3.5 against Michigan State. Indiana is going to be a 2-point favorite against Minnesota. Iowa probably a 1 or 2 point favorite against Nebraska, or maybe it goes the other way there. The Big Ten is full of toss-ups. So yep. Ken Pom saying Indiana is going to go 16-15. Well, there are going to be a bunch of toss-ups in there. Well, and free throw shooting is going to matter. Minnesota plays with some pace, not too much though. They're not up and down, run and gun. There's about the same pace as far as Indiana is concerned from that standpoint. Minnesota currently 77th in the Ken Pom ratings, 80th offense, 86th defense. Indiana's 93rd with 110th offense, 81st defense. Minnesota likes to take and make threes, Matt. Of course, Indiana tends to struggle guarding the 3-point arc. The Gophers have a couple extra day of rest. What should IU fans know about the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who are on a 7-game winning streak?
They're on a 7-game winning streak. They're a pretty good team. All right, not a really good team. They're a pretty good team. They're led by Dawson Garcia, who I believe he's playing, right?
Yeah,
he's back from injury. Yeah,
30 minutes a game. Yep, playing out there doing his thing.
Yeah, he's back. Led by Dawson Garcia. There's a name that probably should sound familiar to a lot of Hoosier fans. They're also led by a backcourt of Mike Mitchell and Cam Christie. Cam Christie has been a sensation this year.
And you got Elijah Hawkins in there.
And Elijah Hawkins, yes. But I want to focus on Cam Christie, who was a guy who people were like kind of excited about at the end of last year as possibly being a decent player for Minnesota this year. He has turned into an absolute monster for them. He's so good. He's much better than his statistics show. Statistically, he's a 10-point per game scorer, but he's a 39% 3-point shooter. He's a very good on defense. Like he is such a good player for this team, and he's exactly what they need next to a guy like Mike Mitchell, who demands more of the ball, and is more of a scorer than Cam is. But I think they're both really, really, really good. Mike's a really good defensive guard, averaging like 1.5 steals per game. So that's got to be something the Hoosiers got to look out for. But this Minnesota team, they share the ball really well.
Well, and this is my problem because, the Gophers to me are exactly the kind of bottom half in the conference team that you'd like to go out there and say, wow, we can chalk up a 15-point home win against them, rest some guys, not stress out, maybe try a couple developmental things. You can't do that right now against the Gophers or against Iowa or against
No.
Penn State or against, Rutgers, obviously. So look, the Hoosiers have their hands full with this matchup. Obviously, if a team ranked 93rd in KenPom can have a trap game, this is kind of a trap game for the Hoosiers. Obviously, don't want them to be looking ahead to Purdue on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
The Hoosiers have to focus all of their attention on beating the Gophers, especially given that Minnesota's feeling good about themselves. They're trying to grow and evolve as a basketball team, and they have 2 extra days of rest in this matchup. And by the way, the Gophers have a few nice wins in this 7-game win streak. They did the Indiana. They won at Michigan, beat Maryland at home. And then they have also incorporated a couple of wins in this streak, including a home win against Nebraska by double digits and thumping of Florida Gulf Coast in Minneapolis. So, this is a Gophers team that I think is really growing, really developing. The weakness that I see here, as far as the Gophers are concerned, is their post defense. Pharrell Payne is someone who has stepped up at times from that standpoint. If you want to say he's the Cliff Omorui of Minnesota, okay, that's where Renew and Ware have to work off each other, passing, scoring, putting Payne in compromised situations, making Payne try to guard 2 guys at once, make his life difficult. Isaiah Enan is someone who's given Indiana some problems before, so I'm going to keep an eye out for him. Dawson Garcia is the tallest guy listed on the roster, but I don't know how much time he's going to be spending pounding down low against Malik Renew and Khalil Ware. So, if you're hoping for Indiana's backcourt to really take a step forward, I'm not sure if this is the game where that's going to happen. I think this might be a bread and butter Mike Woodson special where the Hoosiers really rely on their excellent post players in Renew and Ware. And if the Hoosiers make a few free throws, well, I think they might come away with the win. We're going to talk about what exactly IU does have to do in order to get the victory, predict this game in just a minute. But first, a social media shout out where, hey, look, folks, if you haven't followed us already, you can find us at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. On Instagram, Matt, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly. You can find us there. Lots of big stuff coming through on Twitter for us over the last few days. We live tweet every single Indiana men's basketball game, football game. A lot of statistical looks. We talked about Antelope Valley earlier. Tamar Bates stepping up over the last few weeks at Missouri, averaging double figures on the season. He's crossed double figures in each of the last 5 games, even though he's gotten the same amount of playing time. We saw that OG Anunoby set some records with the New York Knicks, going plus 111 through 5 games in New York after that trade. A lot of live quotes from press conferences that people fly towards, especially when Mike Woodson said he thought his team played with energy on Tuesday night against Rutgers. So lots of stuff there on social media, folks. If you follow us, you'll be right up to speed as far as everything you need to know about IU athletics. Matt, it's going to be an interesting game. KenPom has Indiana winning 74-72. Before we predict this one, what do you think Indiana has to do if they are going to defend home court and get a victory against Ben Johnson's Gophers?
They got to play Hoosier winning defense, and it's got to be from the 3-point line. They have, their 3 leading guards all shoot above 38% from 3. They have Joshua Ola Joseph.
Yeah.
Shoots 50% from 3.
Sure.
Like they have to guard the 3-point line. Like their life depends on it because their tournament lives very much depend on it. By the way, I think the Hoosiers are going to win this game, but I think people are going to hate the way that it will be won, which I don't think will change anybody's opinion on the current situation, which honestly sucks because I think this team should have the support of the fans and support of the fan base. I think they are going to be good. Just give them time. They're like, it's frustrating to watch this team play because they're not well constructed. It doesn't mean they're not good players, and it doesn't mean
Well,
that there isn't good coaching
they've
going
had
into.
good performances this year.
Yeah, that too.
They have, right?
Yeah,
They've actually done it on the court. It's just they haven't done it on the court enough.
the inconsistency is because, to be
Right.
honest,
And
their
the injury.
their
That
major
helps you,
the injury to Xavier Johnson, and when he was injured, the inconsistency was due to the fact that your major contributors are all sophomores and freshmen, right?
Yeah.
So, or mostly all sophomores, right? And so
And
again,
senior
they're
guard.
still young and they're still working out the kinks. So
Yeah. Look,
hopefully, as the season goes on, you'll see some improvement. If you don't, then obviously I will be just as disappointed as the rest of you. But I think the fire Mike Woodson stuff needs to be toned
no,
down.
and it's not even worth it. Mike Woodson's not going to get fired at Indiana.
No,
Like
he's
he's
not.
not going to get fired. If anything else, he gets the Pete Carroll treatment as far as new news, which is like Scott Dolson and Mike Woodson meet, and it's like, hey, Scott, hey, Mike, thanks for your service. Hey, let's promote you to whatever, an administrative role, a consultant role here at
Right.
Indiana, and let's bring in someone else to coach the. Mike Woodson's never, ever, ever, ever going to get fired in Indiana. With that said, you definitely can poke holes in what's happened over the last 3 years during his tenure. Indiana's made a couple of tournaments, but there are some things as far as development of guards, as far as Indiana playing with more freedom on offense, that type of stuff. Work in progress for sure. As far as I look at this Minnesota game, I want Indiana to blow out the Gophers. Right? Like I'm not saying by 30, like I'm saying by 10, 12, 14.
That'd be
16.
impressive if they did that. That'd
Where
be
I'm saying like
extremely impressive.
and again, Minnesota is, a team in a similar space to Indiana where the NCAA tournament is an uphill climb for this Gophers team. They lost by 2 to Missouri at home. They lost by 18 on a sort of neutral site against San Francisco back in November. They lost by double digits to Ohio State and Columbus. The Michigan and Maryland games they won. They deserve credit. They're on a roll as of late. This feels like a chance for Mike Woodson to say, tap the brakes, Gophers. You think you're all cool. You think you're moving in the right direction. You think you're all feeling all great about yourselves. Take this fat L. Right? Like that's what I want to see Indiana play with.
Yeah.
You channel all of that crap that happened on Tuesday night and you go into this game on Friday and say, F it, screw it. We're going to ride the students who are back into Assembly Hall for the first time this year. And we're first time this winter since Christmas break.
Well,
we're going to say, hey,
this calendar year.
This calendar year. We're going to say, hey, let's beat the doors off of these clowns. Even though we're a 2-point favorite, let's give them the Maryland treatment where you go up by 15 and you stay ahead and you stay ahead and you stay ahead and then whatever happens in garbage time happens. Like that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get that.
No. No, again, Minnesota's right there with us. I think they're just as good, if not. They honestly might be better of a team right now.
They're better in Ken Palm. Again, they're only a 2-point underdog, and it might even be 1 point when it's all 1.5 points when it's all said and done. You are absolutely right as far as Cam Christie and Mike Mitchell and Elijah Hawkins and the overall backcourt there. I don't think Indiana wins this game. I really don't.
Now who's the optimistic one and the pessimistic one in this podcast?
Things have changed.
Things have flipped
drastically.
After beating Ohio State, things have flipped.
My concern is that Mike Woodson runs it back. Like I think he puts the same starting 5 out there, and I think you're going to go to Khalil Ware early, and I think you're going to go to Malik Renew in the second half, and I think Trey Galloway's going to have a tough time, and I think CJ Gunn will provide a little bit of a spark, and Gabe Cupps will have another game where it's like 0 or 2 points, and you're going to try to play some defense. And then Akenzie Mbako is going to hit a 3 off a curl in the first 5 minutes. And then after that, it's going to be a bunch of defensive mistakes. Like, I think it's going to be the same thing we saw against Rutgers. I think it's going to be a similar story to what we saw against Nebraska. We don't know who this Indiana team is. We don't know if they're something like what we saw against Kansas or against Michigan or against Maryland at the start of the Auburn game. We don't know if they're the team that we saw against Nebraska or against Rutgers or in the second half of the UConn game. Like we really don't. There's been such a wide range of outcomes as far as this IU basketball team. I want them to win by 15. I want to see them take the last few days personally. I want them to see them defend home court, play for the name on the front of the jersey, play for the past generations of Hoosiers that have driven you to this point, play with that kind of intensity, that kind of mentality, the RMK on the patch. But I don't know if that's going to happen. I have Minnesota winning this game 72-71 in Assembly Hall. Matt, KenPom has the Hoosiers by 2. What's your final prediction here? You said you do think the Hoosiers will get the win on Friday night.
I do think so. I think they'll figure something out in this game that'll help them throughout the year. I think they're going to win by 6. It'll be 76-70.
Ooh, all right. There you go. Looking forward to this game Friday night, FS1. It should be a good one from Assembly Hall. Matt, as we wind down here on this Wednesday night, lots to discuss, lots to think about. Mike Woodson turned things around last year around this time. What are your final thoughts here as we close up on this early January episode?
In the wise words of 2012, stay calm and continue to, Hoosier on or whatever it was. Like you gotta some of y'all need to take a chill pill, man. Like take a chill. It's not Woodson's not leaving. The problems that are happening right now were totally foreseen at the beginning of the year. I could have told you that these were things that could happen.
No bad losses for Indiana.
No bad losses yet. You've only lost to good teams, and Nebraska is a good team. They just beat Purdue at home as well, right? And you'll have a chance to avenge that loss later on this year. Like, I think people are just, there's so much of the season left. There's so much for this, there's so much story yet to be written, and you just got your senior guard back, who I don't even want to talk about the nut tapping incident, but just chill out, chill. If they go on and lose 5 of the next 6, fine, get upset. I'll be there with you. But if they end up winning 3,
I was gonna say if they lose 4, it's not bad.
No, yeah, if they go 2-4, maybe even 3-3, am I asking too much? Like I'm here for that, right? Like they can totally do that. So again, like let's chill out on the hate on this team for now. Let's give it a wait and see.
Actually, you really should go at least 3-3 in this next 6 games. You do have Minnesota, Iowa, and Penn State at home. So fair enough. You do have to go 3-3. But if they're able to do that or steal, plus steal one of these 3 other difficult games,
3-3, 4-2, and you're looking good.
You're cooking. I got nothing else. I mean, folks, if you haven't watched the Indiana women's team for some reason, get on board.
They're the bomb. Yeah.
It is absolutely beautiful basketball.
That's what I'm watching on my second monitor.
And so, man, I'm going to head over and start checking that game out here in the second half. Again, the Hoosiers face the top 5 Iowa Hawkeyes and Caitlin Clark Saturday night on Fox. All the hype leading up to the game is going to be about Caitlin Clark, and Terry Morin and Mackenzie Holmes are going to take that personally, in addition to that rest of the roster who have been just as successful as the Hawkeyes over the last few years. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 320th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation. We will see you next time.
Peace and love, go Hoosiers.